Hey everybody, thanks for joining me today on Classic Mini DIY. So today I'm going to be replacing the thermostat on my motor as well as flushing the coolant system. For this job you're going to need a few things. First you are going to need the thermostat housing gasket. You can get these at Advanced Auto or NAPA Auto Parts. You just need to ask them for a 74 Midget MG. That should have the same gasket as your Mini. 1275, 998. This gasset's pretty uniform across all of those. So go ahead and get a few. It's nice to have some extras. You're going to need gasket sealer. Mine's red. Black's a little better. Looks a little bit nicer on your motor, but this is all I had laying around. You're going to need a flathead screwdriver. This is going to be used to get the lower pipe off of the radiator. It's really far down, so the longer the screwdriver you have, the better. You may even have to get to it from underneath the car. Thankfully mine isn't that way, but you know, every car's different. Next you're going to need a socket driver, and for this job it's better to have deep well sockets because the thermostat housing has long stud bolts on it. It just makes it a little bit easier to get them off. Next you are going to need some pre-diluted antifreeze. If you're doing this during the winter, this is all you're going to need. It's going to fill up your car, you're going to be golden, no freezing, just the right amount of cooling. If it's during the summer, you may want to consider getting a little bit of distilled water. I got a lot just because I like to have some hanging around, but you can run a little bit more water, so instead of running 50-50 antifreeze, you're running something closer to 70% water, which will enhance your cooling ability of your car. And there's no negative effect to it. You're just going to want to make sure you switch it back to more antifreeze when the winter rolls around, otherwise you're going to have water frozen in your engine. Bad. You're going to need the thermostat itself. You can use the one that's already in your car, or if you're wanting to replace it with something that's adjusted for the summer temperatures, you can. I put a link to this in my description if you have any questions about what this does or the different temperatures that it runs at. I outlined that all in the description. Finally, you're just going to want a set of nitrile or latex gloves. These are great. Don't get the antifreeze all over your hands and all the engine grime off. Tends to end with a nicer job. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Alrighty, so the first thing that we're going to want to do is take off this tube here, which attaches to your thermostat housing. Take off your cap for your radiator, and then take off this whole thermostat housing. Don't worry, we're not going to have to remove the whole radiator or anything like that to flush the system, but let's go ahead and get these off and we'll start moving from there. Alright, and as always, there's always some sort of surprise with these cars as far as taking them apart. Obviously the stud came out on this one, so I'm going to want to make sure that I get that stud back in there real good. And of course my little bracket here broke, so I'm going to need a new one of these shrouds here before I bring this car back out and everything for too much driving, although we've still got this one over here. But again, always something random happening with these cars. There, finally. That was not exactly gentle. Took quite a bit of elbow grease, but it did come off. And you'll see your original thermostat is in there. Well, original if it's the first time you're doing this. You can take the old gasket off. That's going to be trash, not going to use that again. And then you take your actual thermostat out. You can set this off to the side. If it's still working, I'd hang on to it, put it back in the car, unless you're replacing this with a summer thermostat or winter thermostat. Just hold on to it if it works. These are always nice to have around. So now that we've got this thermostat housing off and we have emptied out the fluid in the car, before we start flushing the car, we're going to want to get rid of all this extra gasket. It's just a good thing to get it before you start, before you flush the system, because this gunk inevitably falls down into this thing and you don't want that getting all in your water pump and everything. So we're going to go ahead and scrape this out, get it nice and clean and prepped for our new thermostat and our new gasket. And now mind you, it doesn't have to be perfect. just enough clean surface for the new gasket to sit on and prevent any leaks moving forward. Alright, so if you have a newer car, you are probably going to have a newer radiator, which is a very, very lucky thing for you. On the front of the radiator, down towards the front bottom of it, there is a unscrewable drain plug for your radiator. So if you are one of those lucky few that have that on your radiator, this next step is not required. Unplugging the hose in the back of the radiator, which is one of the most frustrating things to do on this car. However, if you don't, I'm going to cover this back here because my car does not have a drain plug, which means I have to drain it through the back of the radiator. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to that so you can kind of see where you need to unscrew. It's kind of a hard view to see, but right up top here is the fill cap for your radiator, and right down at the bottom, see that one little piece of silver right there is your the hose clamp that you're going to need to undo in order to drain your radiator. It's in probably one of the worst places it could be, and this will take a little bit of energy to get undone. I'm going to go ahead and set the camera down, since there's no way to really get a good angle at this. Set it underneath the car, and you guys can see once the fluid starts draining, you pull the hose off and the fluid starts draining out, you're gonna see the catch can down below the car start to fill up. Great job. You've drained your radiator, either by the drain plug on the front if you have it, or from the hose in the back if that's what you have to do, like me. The next step is to actually do the flushing portion of this job. The first thing we're going to want to do is flush down this hole here where the thermostat was. This will dislodge anything in the water pump, kind of flush that out the back there. And then once we have flushed this out, we're going to put our hose in here and flush straight out of here. Now mind you, it's just hose water that we're going to be flushing this out with, no soap, no detergents. Some of them might need rust treatment, but in this job we're not covering that because my head is alright at the moment and doesn't have any rust issues. So we'll go ahead and get on that. All drained. The best part next is looking at the fluid that came out so you can kind of see if your engine is really rusty or if it's really nasty, or maybe it's just really clean and this whole process was really for no reason at all other than replacing that thermostat. So we're gonna go ahead and take a look, and then we will put this engine back together. So moment of truth, how dirty was the motor before I flushed the system? Not too bad. There was a little bit of gunk in this catch pan already, just some leftover oil and things from other things that I've cleaned out, but that is pretty green, which is good to see. That means that you don't have any sort of buildup. There's also no chunks in this of really old radiator fluid that might have congealed. Also, it's not a soupy brownish color, which would mean you have oil in your motor. So great news, thumbs up. And let's go ahead and put this thing back together. Alright, so the next step is to reattach that hose on the back of the radiator. Make sure that the inlet on it, this piece right here that's on the bottom of the radiator, is kind of wet. It helps the tubing to slide on, and make sure that your hose clamp is on before you put the tube on, and it's pointing up in a direction that you're going to be able to tighten it after it's on. Those two things are going to make this whole job as easy as it possibly could be. If you have the drain plug in the front, just screw that sucker back in and move on to the next step. Now also, there are some tools that you have to make if you can't get that hose clamp back on. There's a small hole in your wheel well right down there that you can kind of see the hose clamp. Let's see if I can get a good shot of it. That's the hole, and I'm not sure if you can actually see the hose clamp up there, but it's definitely there, I promise. I retrofitted a tool, little hook on a screwdriver, and I'm going to use this to very lightly, you don't want to puncture your hose there, but very lightly pull the hose clamp, which should be loose already. I'm going to pull it this direction and make sure that it's mounted on the inlet very well and tight. So, set the camera down here. Probably won't be able to see very much, but I might give you some idea what I'm doing. Alright, and once you have that hose clamp in a good spot, you can unretrofit your tool here, if you're like me and use the same screwdriver, and get in there and tighten that hose clamp up. Now make sure with that hose clamp that you're not tightening it if it's not all the way on that inlet, otherwise you're going to have a water leak down there. We're going to test and look for a water leak there later on when we're filling the car back up, but it's always safe to double and triple check things to make sure that you don't have to do any work over again, which is very annoying. So that should be clean enough for our new gasket to go on. I'm going to go ahead and pick up that new gasket and coat it with just a nice layer of our high temp gasket sealer. So here's our gasket that fits nicely on this thing here, and then our gasket sealer. So you don't need a butt ton of this stuff, just enough to make a nice seal. Also, it does dry relatively quickly, so once you start pouring it out, you're going to want to get this on pretty quick. So before we start putting it on, this is our new thermostat. Notice how the spring is on the bottom there, and then on the top you have your opening. This is the preferred method of putting it on. You want to make sure that it fits nice and snugly in there, and you're also going to want to make sure when you do put your gasket on that none of the gasket sealer gets on that. You want to keep it as clean as possible, otherwise you are going to get your your thermostat stuck, and then your whole car is going to get too hot, which is bad. So here we have some gasket sealer put on the gasket. As you can see, it is very, very messy, but we're just going to kind of lightly coat this in that gasket sealer till it's all painted a nice red color. Alright, so as you can see, that's all painted nice and gaskety. You're also not going to want to put gobs and gobs on it. You only just want a bit to make a nice waterproof seal. So that slides right down on top, and you can press that down, make sure it doesn't get too much onto your thermostat, no sticking. And then at this point, I'm going to go ahead and change out my gloves so I don't get gasket sealer everywhere. So the next step is to go ahead and put your thermostat housing back on. This also should have been scraped off on the bottom so that it's ready for remounting. So we'll go ahead and push this sucker back on here. Alrighty, so there we have it. Everything's buttoned back up, reconnected. The last thing we want to do is get our funnel and get ready and fill up this this radiator with our solution. Remember, if it is winter time, you're going to want to use the straight 50/50 diluted antifreeze, which will prevent you from getting any frozen fluid inside your motor. If it's summertime and there's no risk of it going below freezing, you're going to want to use 70% water as opposed to the 50/50. That'll make it a little bit better cooling and prevent you from overheating during the summer months. So let's get this filled up. We can go ahead and close this off. make sure that you return your overflow hose to this here, if you took that off like I did. And other than that, run the car, keep an eye on the temperature, and most importantly, before we finish everything up, go ahead and take one more look underneath the car and see if you are leaking a ton of fluid. It looks like right now I just got the slow drip from some leftover fluid on my subframe. So keep an eye on it and make sure that your car doesn't overheat. Other than that, you should be good. Alright everybody, thanks again for joining me today on Classic Mini DIY. As always, if you have any questions, concerns, you saw something I did wrong, feel free to post it in the comment section below. Or if you like what I'm doing, subscribe. Let me know that you really like it, and I'll keep doing these videos. I got plenty of things to do on my Mini, and I'd love to show you how to do them on yours. Alright, thanks.